Homin, I believe you have a China A shares call as one of your top strategies. Are you worried at all that we are now seeing this regulatory action against some tech firms, not to mention the surge in COVID cases as well?
Well, the regulatory picture remains somewhat uncertain, especially for the tech sector. Since last year, this is something that we as investors need to kind of cope with, on an ongoing basis. But the reason why we favor A-share space is that this is the universe that faces, it's a bit freer from that pressure. It has more sectors that are, currently the strategic focus of the Chinese authorities. And of course, this is a universe that stands to benefit directly from the ongoing dovish shift in the macroeconomic policy there. While we deal with this, ebb and flow in the public health situation, we think in the medium term, the country is heading gradually toward a reopening process. And that, in addition to the policy support, should be favorable to the A-share segment. And this is the reason why we continue to favor that market.
Is there any repercussion from the strength of the U.S. dollar to China overall? I mean, we have seen the resilience in the yuan. Is this a concern? Because we know that in the rest of Asia and emerging markets, a strong dollar is not really great.
It is true that a chunk of inflows that have gone into the market since the start of this pandemic period is unhedged, and we've already seen some outflows, especially in the fixed income segment in past few months. But what we notice is that the active strategies, for instance, they're actually getting into the market now. So you have a bit of tug of war, between the passive outflows and the active inflows. For the market, what's really important is that at the end of the day, it's a surplus economy. Of course, the central bank has enough war chest to defend its currency at an appropriate level. And, investors are encouraged by the ongoing shift in macroeconomic policy and rising visibility of medium term, if not immediate, reopening process for the country. So we think it will be somewhat better protected, compared to the other emerging markets that are far more exposed to this, volatile capital flows.
Homin, how big really is the risk of the strength in the US dollar?
In the near term, we have to acknowledge that it will remain a key risk factor for the entire market, especially for the risky assets. Actually, one thing that we notice now is that the negative correlation between dollar and equities is becoming quite stark, and same for the correlation between dollar and bond yields. So this is an indication that the further strength in the currency will translate into a business cycle risk for the U.S. economy and global markets. In that sense, not all assets will suffer if there's a further strength. But as far as equity markets are concerned, especially for the U.S. market, that's in the crosshairs of all the pressures that will arise from this currency strength, it's still a key risk factor to watch out for.
Are bonds becoming more relevant or more attractive as a hedge in the months to come? And if so, which ones do you like? Which parts of the world?
We think, as you said, bonds, fixed income markets overall had a very, very difficult start to the year. The first half return for fixed income markets is one of the worst in the past few decades. But now the markets are coping with the recession risk. And for the investors, actually, it helps to keep things simple. If there's a recession, which is our kind of base case scenario now for the U.S. and Europe, bonds benefit. And they definitely serve a good role as an equity hedge in the in any diversified multi-asset portfolio. So we do think yields have approached more interesting levels. The likely scenario going forward is that the furthest policy tightness will lead to inversion in the curve and more stability in the long end. So yes, there have been some volatility, But going forward, this asset class will definitely serve as a pretty effective hedge against equities volatilities. So we are keen to have some allocation to this asset class going forward.
So, Homin, given that you mentioned Europe, let me ask you the MLife Pulse question. What's the risk of a debt crisis in the continent?
It's very high, for sure. I think it's very difficult to predict, what will happen to the Russian gas supplies to Europe at the end of this maintenance period for Nord Stream 1. We suspect that it's possible that you simply get back to the previous level just before yesterday, which is not the full capacity for Europe. So it definitely puts the entire continent in the crosshairs of another pretty significant energy shock here. And this is the reason why, first, we see fairly elevated risk of a recession happening in continent toward the end of this year. And also, the growth will suffer, and the currencies will continue to face some headwinds, at least in the very near term.